Okay, everybody, let's get started. And thank you for joining us here for what I believe is the very last event of the entire Labour Conference 2022, and a great way to see it out. And we're very happy that you've all come here to join us with this final and very important discussion. Where this event is a joint event between the Centre for Kurdish Progress and ourselves at the UK Kurdish Assembly, which is the representative body for the UK's very large and growing Kurdish community. My name is Matt Broomfield. I work with the Kurdish Assembly and I'll be chairing the event today. And I'm really glad to have brought our friends and colleagues here together for this final discussion. I think it's very timely. Kind of the major event that's happening now in the Middle East, as I'm sure you'll have all seen, is these uprisings that are happening in Iran. And once again, the Kurdish question, the question of the role of Kurdish people in the region, is at the very heart of that. It's a Kurdish woman who was killed. It's in the Kurdish regions these uprisings are taking place, and it's the Kurdish people there who are providing form to these protests, putting forward a proposal for a democratic solution there. And the same is true also in Syria with its Kurdish population. We were very happy earlier this week to welcome Ilham Ahmed from the Syrian Democratic Council to Labour Conference for some discussions and bilateral meetings, and to speak also about the proposal being put forward there by the Kurdish movement for a democratic solution in Syria. And of course, we look also to Turkey, where, as many of you will be aware, there are elections coming up next year, where on the one hand, the pro-Kurdish, pro-minority rights, pro-democratic HDP party stands a chance of working with other opposition movements to unseat the Erdogan regime and take steps forward towards a more democratic, fairer, more just future for Turkey. But on the other hand, that movement faces intense repression through the courts, through other means, and of course military attacks, as we're seeing now in Iran, in Iraq, and in Syria. So it's a kind of very critical time really for the Kurdish movement, but also a time when some of these ideas and these analyses that the Kurdish movement is putting forward are having a chance to be heard on the world stage, and not just in terms of Syria, not just in terms of Turkey, but even in Iran, and where the proposal for decentralization and democratization being put forward by the Kurdish movement is hopefully starting to reach some ears over here in the West. And so, that's why I'm really glad that we have a very diverse panel that we have here today. We're going to hear from Kim Johnson, representing the UK Labour Party, and our friends here in Britain. We're going to hear from Hişyar Özsoy, who represents the People's Democratic Party, the HDP, in Turkey, who we've just mentioned. We're going to hear from Iida Käyhkö, who will speak a little about the legal and security aspects of the way that the Kurdish movement currently stands on the world stage. Iida works for the Information Security Group as an academic at the Royal Holloway University. But firstly, I would like to welcome Miraz Yolcu, who is the co-chair of the UK Kurdish Assembly, who's just going to say a few words to welcome us all here today. Miraz.
Thank you. So dear friends and supporters and colleagues, as a co-chair in the UK Kurdish Assembly, the largest representative body for the UK Kurdish community, I want to thank you for attending our meeting at this critical moment for the world, the Middle East and the Kurds in particular. The decades-long crisis in Kurdistan has brought fresh attention to the Kurds and their struggle for democracy, autonomy and basic rights. Attacks on Kurds have been their roots in colonial division of Kurdistan into four parts by Britain and other powers in Treaty of Lausanne. Today, they are worse than ever. As we speak, Iran and Turkey are both shelling the Kurdish movement in Iraq and displacing more villages from their homes, while Turkey just yesterday killed two civilian administrators who had been battling to contain the ISIS threat in the 8th deadly drone strike against Kurdish-led northern Syria in a year. And Iran itself is currently seeing massive Kurdish-led uprising following the death of Kurdish woman Jina Amini, with at least 42 protesters has been killed up to date. This crisis has also brought 4 million Kurds to the West, asylum seeking in the last 30 years, including estimated 400,000 Kurdish people in the UK alone. Though the Kurds are still not officially included in the UK census. Violence, war, and discrimination have brought Kurds are here to the UK, where they quietly adopt to a new culture, build a better life, and participate in businesses, politics, cultural life. Kurds have become leading figures in creating the COVID-19 vaccine, MPs, and business people. This Kurdish diaspora also seeks help and solidarity in solving the Kurdish question. We want to create a Kurdistan that is peaceful and free from war and stop the fight of millions of young people from our homeland. We also want to work with the other democratic opposition movements across Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey to create a stable, decentralized, and prosperous Middle East. As a remarkable example of Kurdish democracy in the autonomous regions in North and East Syria shows, the Kurds are crucial to defeating jihadist Islamism and repressive regimes and building a better future for the whole region. To do this, we need support from our friends and partners in Labour. Kurds need the support of the Labour Party, and Labour Party needs the ever-growing Kurdish constitutions. In opposition, in government, we hope Labour will take a step like sending observers to the 2023 election in Turkey, officially meeting with the representatives of Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Council, and engaging with the support to the Kurdish opposition movement now growing in Iran. Let's work together with all partners to solve the Kurdish question, spread our shared values of democracy and social justice to the benefit of all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Miraz. Yeah, and it's good to be reminded, as is often forgotten, that there are so many Kurds living here in the UK, and not only in London, but across all of the major cities, here in the north as well, here in Liverpool, which is one reason why I'm very delighted to now welcome Kim Johnson MP, a great friend of the Kurds, who I know has been very busy this week, of course. So welcome, Kim, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt, and good afternoon, comrades, and I'm really pleased to be able to speak on this very important fringe event, the last one of the conference. I am the MP for Liverpool Riverside, and the conference has taken place in my constituency for the last couple of days, so I hope you've all had a wonderful time in the best city of the world. That's all I'll say. But I just want to start by sending my solidarity to the Kurdish Assembly and to thank Progress and the Assembly for inviting me to speak today, and to the Kurdish people who have shown such strength and resilience and their resistance and struggle for liberation, autonomy and democracy. I'd also like to pay tribute to Mahsa Amini, the Kurdish woman who was allegedly slain at the hands of the Iranian morality police. And I want to send my solidarity to the sisters in Iran and Eastern Kurdistan who are mourning and fighting for their human rights of bodily autonomy and expression. This year has seen a massive growth in human rights abuses across the world and violent assaults against the Kurdish people in Turkey, North and East Syria and Iraq. Turkey now imprisons more journalists than any other country in the world and has hundreds of recorded cases of sexual violence committed against women in Turkish custody. Unlawful arrests and imprisonments of HDP politicians have left only 6 out of 65 democratically elected HDP mayors still in office. There are ongoing efforts to ban the HDP outright through government-controlled courts. 2 Turkish invasions of Kurdish majority regions of Syria have killed hundreds and displaced hundreds of thousands of people, with daily drone strikes killing dozens of people this year, including, tragically, 4 girls in a drone attack on a UN-sponsored school just last month. The fear and the pain that those children faced in a place they should have been safe is unbearable to think about. Turkish army incursions into Iraqi Kurdistan have also resulted in indiscriminate targeting of civilian areas, with more than 40 military bases in northern Iraq, with no signs of withdrawal. Yet Turkey still continues to be treated as a legitimate international ally, with little substantive repercussions beyond hand-wringing and expressions of regret. Since the collapse of the peace talks between Turkey and the PKK in 2015, the situation has worsened dramatically. Violations of Kurdish human and collective rights inside Turkey and neighbouring countries are now being exported into Europe. Years of work to combat this have recently paid off in the Belgian Supreme Court decision that recognises that the Kurdish Workers' Party is engaged in legitimate combat with Turkey and as such should be delisted as a terror organisation. The significance of this ruling cannot be overstated, and we must look at ways in which our own courts can re-examine the status of the PKK to ensure that Kurdish collective rights are upheld as a people, and we can continue to support their struggle for liberation, autonomy and democracy. And this must come alongside pushing for the re-establishment of the peace process between Turkey and the PKK, and a renewed urgency behind calls for the release of Abdullah Öcalan, who has now spent 23 years behind bars, in isolation and without access to lawyers, in violation of international law. Our demands for just and meaningful peace process must start with his release, and immediately. Alongside this, we must consider how the use of diplomatic leverage and arms embargoes can be wielded to bring an end to the catastrophic Turkish assaults in Kurdish majority regions in Syria and Iraq. Lastly, with Turkish elections coming up next year, as we've already heard, we must support OSCE and other election monitors as they visit Turkey and ensure the elections are free and fair, and the results respected by Erdogan's government. And we must oppose at every step the Turkish government's attempts to ban the HDP, Turkey's third largest party. International pressure will be crucial to ensuring that the election results are legitimate and protecting the HDP and Kurdish political representation. So thank you again to the Turkish Assembly and Progress in all the work you're bringing to these issues. Our support and solidarity is unwavering in your struggle, and I'm proud that the UK Labour movement is committed to the safety, freedom of your people. So solidarity, you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much again to Kim. Kim is also a member of our all-party parliamentary group on Kurdistan, and Kim's drive and energy commitment to the Kurdish cause really is appreciated by all of us. We heard that highlighted like a couple of the routes through which the UK Labour movement, the UK government and comrades of all stripes here in the UK can stand in solidarity with and support the Kurdish movement as it faces such violent repression. We're now going to hear, I'm very happy to say, from Hişyar Özsoy, from the Foreign Affairs Commission of the People's Democratic Party, the third largest party in Turkey, a pro-Kurdish party, pro-rights party, pro-democratic party, to speak a bit more about these issues in the Turkish context. Hişyar, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks, Miraz and other friends. I'm so happy to be here. I'm also happy that both Miraz and Matt and Kim, you kind of gave the background, good background information on what is happening with respect to the Kurds in the Middle East and in Turkey. Today I want to focus in more detail on the current political situation right now in Turkey as we are getting closer to the presidential elections, which are normally scheduled for June 2023, so which is about 8 months now. And my contention is that these elections are the most crucial ever elections in the history of modern Turkey. 2023 is the 100th anniversary of the Turkish Republic, the declaration of the Turkish Republic, and we are at some crossroads now. Either President Erdogan and his allies, they're gonna succeed in the elections, win the elections, and turn the whole country into a fully authoritarian country And Erdogan and his allies want to remake both Turkish politics and society in their own image, and I don't think that's a nice image. So, and on the other hand, there is an opportunity for not just the Kurds, but all progressive forces, the women, the college movement, to actually turn this situation into an opportunity and put an end to President Erdogan's dictatorial rule in Turkey. So let me give you a very brief picture of what is happening now on the ground. So we have two main alliances in Turkey. On the one hand, we have the Cumhur Alliance, which is led by President Erdogan, and he has some ultranationalist allies. This is more kind of an Islamist and ultranationalist alliance. On the other hand, there is an alliance which is led by the Republican People's Party, the main opposition, CHP, which is a bizarre party, I would say, like a lot of nationalism, claims to be social democratic, but then, populist. So it's a combination of all. And then some other conservative and ultranationalist parties gathering around the CHP. That is the second alliance. And these two get around 40% each of the national votes. And there is the remaining 20%, which is going to be the determining factor in the election. And we, as the HDP and our allies, I think we get, if we're well organized, I think over 15% will not get recognized. So in any case, the HDP and the HDP's allies will be the kingmaker in the next election. So I want to emphasize this because oftentimes the HDP is depicted and treated as kind of the almost ultimate victim of President Erdogan's policies. Yes, we are. We have been victimized by President Erdogan. The HDP is composed of not just the Kurdish movement, which is the major component of the HDP and the backbone, but we have many other progressive political parties and individuals and intellectuals and movements, the women's movement, feminist movement, the college movement, anarchists, LGBT communities. So, in a way, the HDP is home to all the undesirable populations in Turkey. So we could bring together all the undesirable peoples and carry them to the center of politics to shock the status quo actually. In 2015, when we entered the parliament, we were the most internally diverse group of people, including Yazidi people, Syrian people, Armenians, Alevi people, Kurdish people, like, as I said, all the groups who have been historically excluded and underrepresented in the Turkish political system. So that is why the reaction of the government was very aggressive. Since 2015, when we first stopped President Erdogan from forming a majority government, we have been under tremendous attack. But despite the fact that we have like about 5,000 people still in prison, our co-chairs, former co-chairs, members of parliament, mayors, everybody. Despite that, the HDP has been able to increase its votes in 2018 by 1%, and that was under emergency rule actually. And in 2019, in the local elections, we supported the opposition candidates and we helped to destroy President Erdogan's rule in many metropolitan areas, Istanbul, Ankara, the Eastern Mediterranean, all of it, I would say. Somehow we showed the peoples of Turkey and the international community that if people can come together, and we could come together, we can win. There is still hope in Turkey. I think that was the main message of 2019 because it was a time right after the emergency rule, everybody was in prison, people were fleeing the country, and many people actually, they thought that that was the end of it, so there would be no end to President Erdogan's rule. But in 2019, we could come together, and we won. And now we are getting closer to the elections, 2023. We are expecting the government to get even more aggressive. More detentions, more arrests, even killings, murders, anything is possible in Turkey. But Turkey is in a deep structural crisis. There is the deepening economic crisis, financial crisis. We have problems with all kinds of neighbors, with Iraq, with Syria, with Greece. Although now President Erdogan is trying to gain some upper hand thanks to the Ukraine war and Russia, within the context of the NATO membership, I don't think that will be enough to save him. So we are getting, as I said, closer to the elections. And as we get closer to the elections, just one message to the international community and the Labour Party in particular. Please take, as a truly internationalist party, please take our struggle there as your own struggle here. I'm saying this not just in terms of good rhetoric. It's not just empty words. Because I know that the British Conservative government since 2014 in particular has been the most ardent supporter of Turkish government, of President Erdogan. And almost in all transnational settings that I represent, the HDP, NATO Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and everywhere, they are the spokesperson of the Turkish government, particularly the Turkish government's policies against the Kurdish people, whether in Turkey or in Syria or elsewhere. So that is why, all the kind of conservative reactionary forces in the world, they actually have their alliances, very powerful alliances. And now we have a neo-fascist party in Italy, for example. I swear to you, in a week, President Erdogan will be congratulating her, and they will be having good friendship with Poland, with Hungary. It's the same. So that's why I think it is high time for all the progressive forces, regardless of our countries, try to find spaces to come together, discuss together, and act together. And I emphasize the word action because I think people in Turkey, the opposition, the HDP, we are mostly under tremendous pressure. And the general feeling of people is like one of suffocating because there is so much pressure. And that is why international solidarity visits, trips to, say, Ankara or Diyarbakir or Istanbul, just coming there and recognizing the kind of work that people are doing under tremendous conditions, tremendously difficult conditions. It is very, very empowering. Last time in our Congress in early July 2022, there were more than 100 people who came from 30 different countries, including actually people from the Labour Party, who was with us there. It was an amazing scene for people, very empowering. People were not talking about the Congress, they were just talking about international participation, really. It was such an empowering thing. So that is why, as we get closer to the elections, please find your own ways of contributing to our struggle there. Because if we win in Turkey, and we promise to win, it's going to make major impacts, not only for people in Turkey, but in Syria and in Iraq, in the broader Middle East, and with definitely very important consequences for European people as well, including the UK. Thank you for this opportunity again, and I will be very happy to answer your questions again.
Thank you very much to Hişyar. I would like to take a moment again to recognise the bravery of our parliamentary colleagues in the HDP, to continue working when thousands upon thousands of members of your party have been jailed, including 13 of your parliamentary colleagues, to speak out so bravely and so eloquently in defence of these values is really something remarkable, and we mustn't forget that. I would now, before we continue with the panel and then some questions at the end, just like to read some brief remarks from Ferriol Clark, MP. So many of our parliamentary colleagues here in the UK have already left back to their constituencies. We've received several messages of support. I would just like to read some short remarks from Ferriol, who is the UK's first female Kurdish MP and another great friend of ours here in the UK. The Labour Party stands for values of democracy, social justice and a fair and equal life for everybody. As well as working to promote these values in my constituency of Enfield North and across the UK, I believe Labour has a duty to work with international friends and partners to promote them on the international stage. As such, in 2022, it is more important than ever that Labour continues to work closely with the Kurdish political movement and its representatives. We must support the Kurdish movement in its struggle to secure the enduring defeat of ISIS, to provide a democratic alternative to the Russian-backed Syrian regime and to the authoritarian Erdogan government in Turkey, and to advocate for the protection and promotion of women's and minority rights across the Middle East. In particular, 2023 will see crucial elections in Turkey, where the democratic opposition have the opportunity to become a true alternative to Erdogan's regime, which has killed hundreds and displaced hundreds of thousands of civilians abroad as part of wars of ethnic cleansing against the Kurds, become the #1 jailer in Europe, save Russia, due to its targeting of journalists, political activists, lawyers and other civilians, and run the economy into the ground. Unfortunately, the Erdogan government is seeking to liquidate the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party. The Interparliamentary Union has found Turkey among the world's worst abusers of parliamentary rights, saying over 600 criminal and terrorism charges have been brought against the members of parliament of the HDP since 20 May 2016, when the constitution was amended to authorise the wholesale lifting of parliamentary immunity. UK Labour must stand alongside its sister party in the rule of law by meeting with HDP representatives and sending observers to the 2023 elections. We must pressure Turkey through diplomatic and political channels, since previous elections have been marred by electoral fraud and violence, including bomb attacks against HDP rallies and voter intimidation, as well as ballot stuffing, false opinion polls and attacks on the press. Indeed, 13 Kurdish journalists were detained this year, as Turkey remains among the world's top jailers of journalists. These issues do not only affect, however, tens of millions of Kurds in the Middle East. As the UK's first female Kurdish MP, I know these issues are of great concern to many of my own constituents, hundreds of thousands of Kurds across the UK, and all UK residents who believe in these values. The coming year will be a critical one for the Kurdish cause and its supporters. In the UK and abroad, we will continue working with our friends and partners in the People's Democratic Party, the Syrian Democratic Council and the broader Kurdish movement to promote shared values of democracy, human rights and social justice. Those words from Ferial Park MP. And so we will now go on to hear from our final panellist for today, after which there will be time for some questions and answers. If people want to think of those, we'll have time to take a couple of questions. We've been speaking now about ways politically that the Labour Party and supporters in the UK can engage with and support the Kurdish movement, but this obviously links into questions of justice and of the law and these legal routes which are used to aggressively pursue and repress the Kurdish movement, as we've heard in Turkey, but also indeed here in Europe and here in the UK. And so we're now going to hear, I'm very happy to say, from Iida Käyhkö from the Information Security Group of Royal Holloway University. Iida, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you to all of the organisers of this panel and to the other speakers. I'm going to pick up on something that was already brought up by Kim and just delve into it a little bit deeper, which is the complicity of many European states, including the UK, in criminalising and repressing the Kurdish movement here in Europe, which is usually done on the basis of the terrorism listing of the PKK. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the need to delist the PKK. Some of you might remember earlier this year, Finland, which is where I'm from, Finland and Sweden applied to join NATO following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Prior to submitting their NATO applications, both countries were quite confident that they wouldn't face any obstacles from existing NATO members, each of which has to ratify and approve application to join NATO. As it turned out, as soon as the application had been submitted, the Turkish state issued a statement outlining the so-called security concerns they have around Finland and Sweden's harbouring, this is the language of the Turkish state, harbouring of Kurdish and other political dissidents and terrorists. In June, the three states, Finland, Sweden and Turkey, issued a trilateral memorandum which turned out to have been drafted by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, outlining their agreement on some key issues in response to these stated security concerns. Finland and Sweden agreed to reconsider the arms embargo that has been in place since 2019. They agreed to reconsider extraditions of political dissidents to Turkey, and they agreed to further improve intelligence sharing and monitoring of Turkish and Kurdish political movements in Finland and Sweden. NATO was pretty powerless in the face of this, and in fact in many ways complicit in this pretty blatant violation of the human and political rights of Kurds in Europe. And especially bearing in mind that the so-called terrorism claims that the Turkish state has about people living in Finland and Sweden include things like downloading Signal, a secure messaging application, or posting on social media in unflattering ways about President Erdogan. So this is nothing new. This is just the latest in a long line of diplomatic lobbying and what some might call blackmail on the part of the Turkish state in order to pursue the policy of counter-terrorism against progressive and Kurdish political movements. So the Turkish state has for decades lobbied for the inclusion of the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and other movements on terror listings, and this has been very successful. There's a couple of reasons why terror listing is such a powerful tool, especially over the last couple of decades. Counter-terrorism policy and legislation has become massively broad, so it allows states quite extraordinary powers in covert surveillance and targeting of political activists in a number of different ways. It also creates a very powerful narrative in which the Turkish state can say, you know, these people are terrorists and that means that they are morally evil. They are a danger not just for Turkey but for the entire world, and Turkey then can position itself as this kind of valiant defender of, you know, law and order. In reality, obviously, this obscures the state terrorism that the Turkish state carries out against Kurds everywhere, and also against, you know, other nations and its own population, including, for example, the HDP. And bearing in mind that the Kurdish movement is a key progressive force in the Middle East, as we can see with the uprisings in Iran, in Hişyar at the moment, following the murder of Hişyar. This is a hugely powerful and popular movement that has the potential to really transform social realities across the Middle East. But in saying that this is a terrorist movement, Turkey makes it possible to present as, you know, politically neutral, to back away from peace talks, or even morally right to say we don't negotiate with terrorists. Whereas obviously these movements are natural allies to any left-wing or progressive political movements in Europe as well. So the situation with Finland and Sweden's NATO application is just the latest in a long line of lobbying and targeting activists in Europe. Kurdish activists and pro-Kurdish movements are very used to being targeted with raids, prosecutions and surveillance. There have also been many cases of people being physically attacked, either by far-right and Turkish far-right movements in Europe, and also there have been so-called security operations carried out by Turkish state intelligence forces within Europe, with very little pushback from European states. One notable case is the murder of 7 agencies and 2 other Kurdish women in Paris in 2013. EU, NATO, and you know, generally European states tend to go along with this and basically give Turkey carte blanche in pursuing these policies. I also want to point out that, as Kim was saying, the Belgian Supreme Court ruled recently that the PKK is not a terrorist organisation, but engaged in armed conflict with the Turkish state and is therefore under general, you know, conflict law. The Belgian state then rushed to say, following this verdict from their own courts, that they would continue treating the Kurdish movement as terror suspects within Belgium. So European states are also contravening their own laws and going against human rights legislation in pursuing this political agenda pushed for heavily by the Turkish state. So delisting the PKK would have an enormous impact in terms of securing Kurdish people's political rights in Europe and also improve that situation in the Middle East. It would cut Turkey's capacity to bargain and carry out basically blackmail within its international obligations. and it would pave the way for a genuine peace process in the Middle East, because right now European states are basically, including the UK, are basically doing Turkey's dirty work for them, and targeting, organisations that are involved in party politics, in political lobbying, in community organising in the UK. And the UK is just as complicit in this as most other NATO member states. So the campaign to delist the PKK is already underway in the EU, and I would hope to see the Labour Party supporting a similar campaign in the UK as well. I also want to point out that, for example, the kind of practical difficulties that people who are affiliated with pro-Kurdish political movements in the UK, those difficulties are faced by many people in situations where they really make no sense. For example, Elif Sarıcan, the former co-chair of the Kurdish People's Assembly here in the UK, was meant to be chairing this panel, but she was unable to attend the conference because of so-called security concerns, which meant that she wasn't given a pass to attend. And this is something that has affected a number of people over the years in trying to attend Labour conference. So this is very pervasive. So, there are massive difficulties in getting organisations delisted, especially with the very kind of overwhelming moral narrative about terrorism. But as we can see, for example, with the Good Friday Agreement, this process is something that is absolutely necessary for paving the way to peace, and something that, especially in an increasingly militarised world, should come naturally to the Labour Party and all other left-wing progressive forces in society to say, actually, counter-terrorism legislation is frequently used by authoritarian states to target opposition, to violently suppress people's human rights. And there is no other route to long-lasting peace in the Middle East and therefore in Europe as well, because let's remember, these are also very intricate trade and military links that are growing stronger every day. There's no other route to lasting peace other than standing with the Kurdish movement and saying these terrorism charges are trumped up, they are ridiculous, and they have a very specific political agenda that many European states have been all too happy to further at the expense of any integrity around talking about political and human rights for Kurdish people.
Thank you, Iida. Thank you to Iida, especially for highlighting something that I think we need to remember, which is that it's not just a question that we're talking about here of Western states in the UK turning a blind eye to things happening within Turkey, but on the contrary, governments like our own play a very active role in furthering Turkey's own objectives, as Iida just illustrated, for example, by pursuing Turkey's security interests overseas, and by very actively working either to whitewash or to push towards kind of shared goals. So I'm going to open the floor in a moment to a couple of questions.